I wanted it to be kind of a treasure that people discover as they learn more about the company.
Mm.
And so Walden was a book that I read in high school and that had a really profound impact on me. And kind of like that time I just told you about in 2009, there's a moment where I recall vividly where I was. I was like, Walden, I remember that book. That's the type of experience that I'm thinking of. That's what people
Mm.
want. That's what people are going to come to this place to do.
Welcome to Behind the Stays, a podcast that shares the stories behind your favorite boutique hotels, short-term rentals, and hospitality brands, and the hosts, operators, and entrepreneurs who've brought them to life. Every Tuesday and Friday, you'll meet the military veterans, the retired flight attendants, the tech entrepreneurs, the school teachers, the single moms, the hoteliers, and real estate investors who are all, in their own unique ways, shaping the future of travel and hospitality. Discover how these visionaries from all over the world have built stunning landscape hotels in the mountains, designed bohemian bungalows on the beach, erected eclectic, off-grid, nature-immersed escapes, and so much more. Behind the Stays is brought to you by Journey, a first-of-its-kind loyalty program that brings together an alliance of the world's top independently owned and operated stays and allows travelers to earn points and perks on boutique hotels, vacation rentals, tree houses, ski chalets, glamping experiences, and so much more. And I'm your host, Zach Boozy Cruz, head of the Journey Alliance. All right, friends, without further ado, enjoy the show. In just a moment, you'll meet Blake Smith, the visionary founder of Walden Retreats, a boutique property that masterfully blends the serenity of nature with sophisticated design. Inspired by his years living and working in East Africa, Blake brought lessons from safari camps and Ugandan hospitality back to Texas, reimagining what it means to escape into nature. Walden Retreats, named after Henry David Thoreau's iconic work, offers guests a profound connection to the outdoors, crafted through thoughtful design, simplicity, and intentional experiences. From hand-curated spaces that encourage guests to slow down and reconnect, to the inspiration behind their signature safari tents, Blake's journey from building a social enterprise in Uganda to creating an immersive nature retreat in the Texas Hill Country is nothing short of extraordinary. Tune in to hear how Blake's time in East Africa shaped his unique hospitality vision, the story behind Walden's name and its connection to Thoreau's philosophy, why Walden Retreats issues traditional luxury for thoughtful simplicity, insights on balancing guest comfort with an authentic connection to nature, the future of Walden as it grows from a 15-unit retreat to an expansive portfolio, and so much more. All right, friends, without further ado, get ready to meet Blake. Alrighty, folks, we are live. Blake, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing, my friend?
Good morning, Zach. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. Doing well.
Well, thanks for coming on the show. I've followed Walden Retreats for a while, and I was actually trying to remember how I first discovered you guys. I actually think it was through an Instagram reel that I saw that a friend shared or something. I think that was my first foray into the Walden Retreats ecosystem. And I have been dying to get your story and understand a little bit more about how you built the brand, how you think about the future of the brand. But I wanted to start with just a very open-ended and quite frankly, a big question, which is, where does the story of Walden Retreats really begin?
Yeah, that's a fun story to tell because it's definitely not your typical, or if there is a typical kind of hospitality experience. But the story of Walden really began back in 2009 in Kenya.
Hmm.
So I was at the time working in East Africa. I had helped co-found a social enterprise that provided job skills and training to women. And we built a jewelry brand that we sold here in the States, and then proceeds from that funded support programs for them. So
Wow.
I was in Uganda. I was based there for 6 years, and just got to travel to a lot of cool lodges, safari camps. You name it, just a wide range of really unique hotels in that area, and was just really inspired by the design and the simplicity of it, and also the intimacy with nature. You know how they're
Hmm.
built in rainforest and trees and on the savannah, and just always felt or kind of questioned when I was there, like why don't people build hotels like this in the U.S.
Hmm.
And there's no safari to go on and see animals here in the States, but I felt like there are a lot of compelling regions that are really pretty and people want to go spend time in, and so I just logged that away as like a future idea for one day because at the time I was, deep in my work over there. But my wife and I, we actually met while she was in grad school over there. So we
Wow.
met there. We moved back to Austin so I could go to grad school here, and I'm from Texas, so it was kind of a natural fit. And from there, I actually had to use this idea as a proposal for a business plan for an assignment for a
Huh.
class. So it was a
Huh.
class project that ended up turning into a business. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. So I want to go back. What inspired you to go to? So you said you lived in Uganda, but the business was in Kenya. If I heard you correctly, what inspired you to go to Africa to begin with?
The business was in Uganda. I was just in Kenya at a safari camp on the
Ah, okay,
Masai Mara. So
okay,
that's where I was, and I remember it very distinctly thinking I was looking around these tents. I was like, these are so cool, and everyone who's here with me thinks they're so cool, and that's almost like half the experience is just staying in that type of lodging. They're
yeah,
there, we were there to go and see lions and giraffes and all that, but just the appeal of the way that they had set up the camp and the lodge and that experience. So yeah, that was in Kenya, but I was in Uganda. I had been invited to go see this organization that I ended up working with by a friend just on a whim. We went over there in 2007 for 2 weeks, and I was transitioning over. Being a ski instructor
huh,
in Colorado and needing to kind of wrap my time up doing that. And I decided that while I was looking for my next opportunity, I would volunteer for this organization. And soon enough, it turned into kind of a full time opportunity. I went over there. They wanted me to spearhead the development of this social enterprise that would really provide job skills and training for women, but then provide a business and revenue for the organization to help support itself. And so, yeah, that's what took me to Uganda in 2007.
wow. Did your friends and like family back home think you were crazy? I mean, it's one thing, right, to go. People go on like mission trips all the time, and it's one thing to go. Like I think about Scott Harrison from Charity Water, and he
Right.
brings A-list celebrities over to do these to observe these water
Yeah.
projects and whatnot, and and then they go back to their very comfortable lives. You were there for 6 years. Like, what did your friends and family think?
Probably a lot of things they didn't even tell me, but I imagine, confused, worried, just befuddled in a way. But I think also they probably respected that I was really passionate about it and that I was going to go out and do something that I believed in, that I cared about. And because they knew that that's always who I've been and who I am. And
Yeah.
so, but they got to come visit and I hosted them, and I wasn't there for 6 years, like straight. I came back. We had an office in the States that I was kind of in charge of running. So I kind of would split my time, throughout the year in both places.
Wow. Oh, God, that's just so amazing. I love that you did that. Very, very cool. I'm sure it's like really, shaped how you see the world. I like to ask
For
people who
sure.
spent some time overseas, and it sounds like you did some traveling while you were in Uganda. Just from a hospitality perspective, what's an observation or two about how folks in either Uganda or Kenya do things differently than folks here in
Yeah.
the States with respect to how they deliver hospitality?
Well, I would say hospitality is a really core tenet of the culture in Uganda. And that's not to
Mm,
say that people in the States and modern countries are not hospitable, but I mean, you invite someone in, you serve them tea, you prepare them a meal. It's a must. And as a guest, you really can't refuse that. And if you do, it'd be kind of a huge, uh, finger to them in a way.
mm,
So hosting people, hosting gatherings is really core to the Ugandan lifestyle and culture. And so it manifests itself through the staff. They're all super friendly, super warm, very outgoing. I mean, it's their pleasure to help you and serve you.
yeah.
And so that's a huge thing that's different there. I've been to Southeast Asia. I have similar feelings about that part of the world as well. Just hospitality and generosity is so much more ingrained into the people and the lifestyle and culture there. The design of the tents, or camps, or hotels is a lot more creative and unique. I
Mm,
think a lot of it has to do with like no building codes, no inspections. So, buyer beware in a way, but it allows for just so much more creativity. I mean, one of the most amazing places I've ever been was really just 20 minutes from where the town I lived in. We lived in Jinja, where the Nile River comes out of Lake Victoria. And about a
Okay.
20-minute drive is a lodge called Wildwaters. And they built this camp in the middle of the Nile River on an island. And so you have to take
Wow.
a boat over there to get there, and everything comes over on a boat or like a little trolley they built. So that's an example of things that can be done, around the world that are just way out there and super cool and unique that would be really hard to pull off, in a place like the States. Yeah, but those are a few of the key things that I think are really distinct and different.
It's so funny. I haven't I've never actually been to Africa or anywhere in Africa. But so I can't speak to that. And then I've spent very, very little bit of time in Southeast Asia, really just in Singapore, and
Hmm.
and so I can attest to that there. But it is just really funny how I think when I hear stories of friends who go over and have these incredible experiences, or they go on safari and they come back and they talk about how, like, a lot of the things that you just get as part of just staying at the hotel are things that, like, in the States you'd be charged like premium packages for. Like, there was like,
Right,
you just
right,
go there, you pay for your room, and then all of a sudden, like, you're just like surprised and delighted with all these things. Whereas in the States, at the end of your stay, every little thing that you were quote unquote surprised by was added to your tab, right? Added to your bill. So it seems like there is
right.
just like this like ingrained sense, just a different sense in terms of sort of I don't know if it's the purpose of hospitality, or what hospitality should include, that you can find in some of these other parts of the world that you can certainly find in the States, but seems harder and harder to find those today.
Yeah, for sure. It feels a lot less transactional over there and more like they're hosting you, that you're a guest
Mm,
in their home and they treat you the
mm,
same way they would, if you were actually in their house. So, yeah.
wow. So you obviously have a lot of inspiration from your time in Africa that has gone into building Walden, and I want to talk about that in a second. But I want to talk about the name, because you named Walden Retreats after Henry David Thoreau and his sort of iconic work. What
Hmm.
what about Thoreau was inspiring to you, or has Thoreau played a particularly influential role in your life? And talk to us a little bit about naming Walden Retreats.
Right. Um, so I always felt that branding is just paramount. The
Mm,
name, the look, the feel, it seems insignificant maybe, but the most iconic brands have spent hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, trying to figure out what the right positioning is for their brand, their name, their language. And so I always started with that. It was really important. It wasn't just like Blake's glamping. That's not it doesn't appeal to the masses, but more importantly, it doesn't communicate. I wanted it to be kind of a treasure that people discover as they learn more about the company.
mm,
And so Walden was a book that I read in high school and that had a really profound impact on me. And kind of like that time I just told you about in 2009, there's a moment where I recall vividly where I was. I was like, Walden, I remember that book. That's the type of experience that I'm thinking of. That's what people
mm,
want. That's what people are going to come to this place to do. And sure enough, the URL was available. It was a name that was easy to spell.
mm,
Wasn't going to get confused with spelling, and so and then I think the thing that really cemented it was the poetry in the book really speaks life into the experience that we're offering people in a
mm,
way that I or some copywriter really could never replicate. Um, and so for all those reasons, like it was a natural fit. But then on a more like philosophical level, his experiment of going and living away from the city and living self-sufficiently, and then reflecting on that and really noticing how nature is so ingrained in who we are as a people, and you really can't engineer that out of us, no matter what.
yeah.
As long as we don't become cyborgs, I guess I should say. But that is so core and such a tenet to life,
Mm,
modern life as well. And I just felt like that was a really key thing of what I wanted the brand, but more importantly, the experience to be about. Um, and so that was really kind of the story about how we arrived at Walden.
I love it. And there's something that is, I just feel like is so beautiful about taking something that is, well known, or someone that is well known, and sort of like re offering like an additional take on that
Hmm.
individual, or on that individual's philosophy. I mean, when I first thought when I first discovered Walden Retreats, I just assumed it was like a family name, right? And I was like, oh, like, but then I was like, well, this is Blake Smith. Interesting. And of course, then
Yeah.
you spend a little bit of time on your website, and you quickly sort of like learn who Walden really is, or who the Walden is that you're referring to. And I do think there's sort of this like lost opportunity to tap into these figures or well-known individuals who have a very distinct and philosophical perspective on something, and then leverage that name in the context of a hospitality brand. Like, it's, I guess, a simpler way of putting this is, I love layers, right? And so when you
Hmm.
first, Walden Retreats in and of itself, it sounds nice. You kind of assume immediately it's a family name, but then upon learning a little bit more about the intention behind it, it just immediately elevates like your perception of the brand. And as I walked through your website and read more and more and more, I've never been there, right? I've never actually
Hmm.
stayed in your place, but like my perception just got of sort of the value offer of Walden got deeper and deeper, and I got more and more and more excited, realizing that the brand, if the brand is so layered and there's been so much thought put into even just the name, how much more
Yeah.
thought has probably been put into the actual experience. And I think that that's what a great name, quite frankly, in addition to a great brand, can do.
Yeah. Well, thanks. So that's achieved, exactly what we wanted. Like I said, about it being kind of a discovery process for not just a beautiful place and a unique kind of tent, but, the experience and how we've engineered it from everything when people check in to, how the tents are designed, how the property's laid out, what the communication is like between us and the guest. All kind of reflects, that kind of philosophy of keeping it simple.
So I was talking with some friends recently who listen to the podcast, many of whom have also been on the podcast. And we were remarking that the funny thing about the internet, right? The funny thing about hosting a podcast is you sort of are in the ears and, minds of people, lots of people every week. And yet you don't know most of those people, right? Like, most of you listening to this podcast right now, like, I've never met. I don't even know your names. It's crazy. And I want to change that. I want to get to know you guys. And so I want to eventually be able to throw like a behind the stage summit and, do a big live event, and we'll do that one day. But that day is not today, but we do have an opportunity to meet in person, because I have just been invited by the folks at IMN to their short-term rental forum that they're hosting in January 15th through 16th at the JW Marriott in Miami. This is a premier event for top operators, owners, investors, and tech providers in the hospitality space, and specifically the short-term rental space. So they've invited me to come do some live podcasting. I'm going to be speaking at the event. It's going to be absolutely amazing. And I would love for this to be the opportunity where I get to meet a lot of you in person, right? Give you a handshake, right? Give you a hug if that's who you are. And the reality is, like, I have loved hosting this podcast. It's so amazing. And I'm so thankful to be able to talk to guests every single week. But, right, my real love is people. I love networking. I love sharing ideas. I love collaborating, right? I love sharing cocktails with folks and talking about the future, right? And what better place to do that than at the short term rental forum that IMN is hosting this January? So if I'm not reason enough to come, right? If this amazing event isn't reason enough to come, you should come, because some of your favorite podcast guests who've been on this show and many others in the industry, they will also be at the event. So folks like Ben Wolf from Onera, folks like Isaac French from Live Oak Lake, folks like Mauricio Padilla and Emily Padan from Hinter, and folks like Matt Orley from Red Cottage, and so many more. As I mentioned, I'll also be podcasting live at the event. So once you register for the event, you'll get the opportunity to apply to be on the podcast. So if that's something that you'd like to do, I'd love to give BTS listeners preference to be featured at the actual event. Now, here's the kicker, right? So this event is January 15th through 16th in Miami at the JW Marriott. It's going to be absolutely amazing, right? But early bird pricing is available, but it ends this Friday, November 22nd. And because you're a listener of the show, you can use the discount code BTS, that's BTS as in behind the stays, for an extra 15% off that lowest rate. But again, that expires Friday, November 22nd. There's still plenty of time to, register for the event after. But if you want the best possible deal and you want 15% off of that best possible deal, be sure you register before Friday, November 22nd, and use the discount code BTS at checkout. If you have any questions about the event, feel free to shoot me an email directly at zach@joinjourney.com, and I would love to share more details with you. But if you're ready to register, you can head on over to events.imn.org/STR25. You can lock in your spot, and then I will see you in Miami this January. Again, that's events.imn.org/STR25. If that's too long to remember, just scroll on down to the show notes and I have the link there. All right, guys, enjoy the episode. Today, you guys have 15 safari tents, and you've got a collection of both suites and then studios. I'm curious, I want to talk a little bit more about the philosophy behind how you actually, went from coming up with the name to actually deciding on the structures and whatnot in just a second. But in terms of your portfolio, how did you guys decide how many suites to do versus how many studios to do? Did you think about sort of like a medium-sized offer between the two? I'm always intrigued by how people arrive at the decision on not just unit type, but unit size.
Yeah. So quickly on the unit type, the hill country is really similar geographically, and the landscape is very similar to a lot of places that safari camps typically are in Kenya and Uganda, Tanzania. And so it was a natural kind of fit just from a look and feel, and then the climate is a good match. And then we wanted nature to not be like engineered out of the experience. Like we wanted soft-sided tents. We wanted the wind to blow these things around. We wanted them to get a little hot, to get a little cold. We wanted people to wake up and hear the birds and go to bed and hear the crickets. And so that was kind of why I was, kind of just really going after like hard-sided units. So we started with two, same size, same exact everything. And that was like our first just, what is this? What does it take to run? Is there a demand for it? What can we learn from guests staying in these that we can use as data points to build out a larger property and eventually a larger portfolio? So we did that for a couple of years. And as we laid out the site, I spent countless hours just walking around, just hiking around the property and just envisioning where we could do what. But it wasn't really necessarily a science. It came down to an art of cost, utility runs. We developed all our own utility infrastructure, private water systems, sewer systems, all of that. And so you can't just run these things all over the property. It'd be way too expensive. And then operationally, that's incredibly inefficient for staff to try to maintain. Some of it came down to negotiation with neighbors as far as like how close are the units to their property line? Is it going to cause any disturbances? And then how many can we fit? What do we think an appropriate size would be for groups and weddings? And then obviously budget. What does the financial model look like? What's the fundraising environment? What operationally is it going to take staffing wise? So there were a lot of different factors into getting to the 15 units. As far as how many of each one, again, that really came down to the layout of the property, the land, how many we could fit. But like we wanted them to be pretty well spaced out, to where people felt like they had a little bit of sense of privacy, but you don't want them spaced out too much because then people feel like they have the whole place to themselves and they make a lot of noise. You want to be aware of your neighbors, but you don't want to feel like they're encroaching on you. So yeah, that was kind of, measuring. We would walk out there and make sounds, talk, measure distance, see how far that was, and just try to, ballpark it kind of on the ground of how we wanted the property to be laid out and how that would enhance and, hopefully not deter the guest experience.
Was the idea with the studios and the suites at the start just to have two different unit types at two different price points and to be able to attract like a more diverse set of consumers, or was there any other specific thought there?
Yeah, exactly. The suites have a living room that has some lounge furniture, but it also has a wood burning cast iron stove, which is really cool, especially now, in the winter. But we knew that wasn't necessarily going to be appealing to everyone. And yeah, to have a lower price point, to have something that was a little bit more achievable or attainable for people. I think, so the studios are exactly the same minus that one kind of wing.
Got it. Okay. Interesting. I want your take on the market. Because there are, I've said this a zillion times on this podcast. I like to think of like the Texas Hill Country as sort of a mecca of these like unique stays and experiential
Yeah,
hospitality brands that have just popped up, and some are amazing, and some I think leave a lot to be desired. How have your thoughts on the market evolved over the last few years? Because you guys started earlier than many other individuals who've really got into the space at like the halfway through COVID, and really just started building out all these sort of crazy concepts. What, if anything, have you learned and or changed your mind about with respect to the competition that I have to imagine in some way, shape, or form has affected you guys?
for sure. Yeah. So we bought the property in 2017. There were maybe like one or two other properties of a similar type at the time when the idea kind of first came to fruition. And since then it's become a lot, pretty crowded, I would say. Not necessarily with like tents and exactly the type of units, but just outdoor hospitality, landscape hotels, glamping, all under that umbrella. It has
Yeah.
become pretty crowded. And I think we're pretty fortunate in where we're located, which was always like a super high priority for how we chose the property is what has staying power,
Mm.
beyond it being a cool property. And,
Yeah.
the destination cannot maybe just be the in and of itself, the property. You have to be in an environment, an ecosystem that people want to be in, want to be, going to. So we're between Johnson City and Fredericksburg. So there's a huge wine business that people come and frequent and tour. I think the energy around like the growth of the Austin market has waned a little bit since
Mm.
COVID. COVID like ramped up, like everyone and their brother was moving to Austin, and that provided a whole lot of exposure for us and energy. And has since waned. So both San Antonio and Austin are not growing at near the clip that they were.
Yeah.
But I think from a regional perspective, the Hill Country is one of the only regions in Texas that attracts out of state tourism. It's really one of the only scenic, destinations. And I'm from Texas, born and raised here. It's the Hill Country, the coast, and then Big Bend. Aside from
Yeah.
that, there's not a whole lot of, destinations unless people just want kind of an urban city experience in Dallas or Houston. So, it has a lot of staying power, but yeah, there's a lot of competition, which I think I welcome. I mean, it makes us, stay on top of our game, making sure we're providing value, making sure we're still going to stand out and be unique.
Yeah. I'm always curious with folks who've invested in these locations kind of earlier than a lot of other individuals. I would imagine, right at the time. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Blake. But I imagine at the time things like social media and caring like a lot about sort of like a direct booking strategy, like all these elements probably weren't as important at the
Right.
beginning, because if you guys were one of the few, right, and then people did hear about this crazy cool like safari tent landscape resort that they could stay at, that was something super novel at the time. And then now, like I feel like every other reel that I see on my feed, I certainly have a bias towards the Texas Hill Country because I've been there several times, and I've
Right.
been fortunate enough to see a lot of these places. So I'm sure my algorithm is just like serving me 80% content that's from stays in the Texas Hill Country, and I'm sure this isn't actually true, but I would imagine like that's had to change the way in which you guys think about marketing and promotion. Or has it? Like, how has your promotional strategy, your marketing strategy evolved over the last couple years as competition has increased a bit?
Yeah, social media was always a priority for us, but we didn't know how important it would become. But I remember talking to investors about, how are you going to promote this? How are you going to market it? And it all went back to like property selection,
Mm,
design, like how you design and lay out your property in a way that allows people to take pictures and share with their friends is super important. You
yeah.
want because word of mouth is going to be it is for us, your biggest marketing resource. I mean, who else to give a good reference and a trusted friend, or someone sees it on their Instagram and it's like, where is that? I got to go there. I got to see this place. So, site selection and layout in a way that provides really cool, unique opportunities, like how the tents face the sun. That's not an accident. Like we did that
Mm,
on purpose so that people
mm,
could take pictures of it and they could promote it. little nooks that we built by the river. That's not an accident. That's there because people want to take pictures there. So all those kind of things are really important in your site design and selection. And then social media has proven to be even more of an impact from us to let our brand stand out and
Yeah.
let a lot of the poetry and the words and the language of Thoreau kind of speak life into the brand in that way. As far as we've done some cool voiceovers with quotes from the book. There's quotes that
Mm,
we put and use as captions instead of us trying to write something.
mm.
And that all those things get the most engagement because it's so alluring and eloquent and really just getting at a core of what a lot of people are looking for these days when they have leisure time.
I love that. It's sort of the antithesis of the, you know, POV. You booked a crazy couples stay in the Texas Hill Country, or come follow me and tour my couples getaway in the Texas Hill Country. You contrast that with, a beautiful excerpt or stanza from Thoreau overlaying, like, of course, like beautiful imagery and some
Right.
ambient music, and all of a sudden, right, that reel looks so different than the reel that's going to pop up before and after it. And I love that because everyone's doing the other thing now. So it's taking it up a notch, and because of your brand, you don't even you don't have to write the poetry yourself.
Exactly. It's already there. It's a library of just gold. So yeah, we're super fortunate to kind of have that as a resource for us.
So this idea too of people getting away, escaping to nature, disconnecting. This is certainly something that we saw it kind of explode during the pandemic. I think you could argue that it's maybe waned a little bit, but I still think that this idea of individuals wanting to escape and disconnect and hear themselves think again is something that all of us who spend most of our time on Zoom calls and most of the time working on a laptop, we all
Right.
crave, right, this sort of experience. I'm curious, what have you learned about your guests, and what insights have you garnered around the people and that come and stay at Walden? Anything particularly surprising to you about what you hear from guests after they leave about what their experience of Walden was like?
I mean, in summary, it's much more profound than we ever could have dreamed, to be
Mm,
honest with you. And we weren't sure at the time, how much time are people actually going to spend at the property versus they're just there so they can have a place to stay in the middle of, a lot of state parks and local attractions. But guests spend, 75% of their time on the property. And we
wow.
don't have a pool, we don't have entertainment, we don't have anything. I say we don't have anything. The property is amazing, but we didn't build anything, we didn't craft anything. So it's amazing just because it's always been that way.
Yeah.
But guest write, we have guest books in every single room, with a pen and paper and just like old school, like guest book style. And that's so people can give us some direct feedback on what their experience was like. But they'll also sit and write like a whole page.
Mm,
And that was unexpected. Then the things they write are just amazing. We've had people who said, their time there like saved their marriage.
wow.
I had a woman tell me that she like went to bed weeping because as a girl, she always dreamed of like one day having a tent and sleeping under the stars, but she was always like too afraid to like go camping. And so
Wow.
we provided this like really unique kind of childhood dream for her, and like you don't ever think that that's ever going to happen. That's like
Yeah.
totally what you want, but that and even if it happens, they're not going to tell you about it. So we've been really fortunate to hear a lot of amazing feedback from people, and a lot of them just enjoy the art of doing nothing. I
Mm,
mean, it sounds
mm,
boring, but man, it's so needed. It is so needed. At its core, a tenet of human nature that I've seen and learned is that people want what they don't have, and that can be kind of maddening. But in a day when people are so busy, so consumed, I've got literally like hundreds of friends. And then I have a unique, perspective because living and working in Uganda where life is so not that. And it's
yeah.
so core to like communal and friends, like small groups. And we live in such a different world. And so getting to see those two, um, and see the ways in which, slowing down, simplifying things is so beneficial to your mind, to your being, and just to sit on the porch, have a drink, and just sit in silence. I mean,
Yeah.
we're not all about like structured meditation or anything. I think a lot of people do that, but um, it's really kind of what the property was all designed to be, and we'll always have that as kind of its core of giving people the chance to like reflect on like how am I doing, where am I going, how are my friends, how's my wife, how are my kids, um, and that for a couple days or however long they spend there, there's nowhere they need to be, there's nothing they need to do, there's nowhere they need to go. I mean, I haven't, I've got kids and a wife and a business, and I don't get the luxury of that very often. And so, I think a lot of people feel the same way.
Yeah, yeah. Oh gosh, I love it, and it's reminding me too of sort of this opportunity. I've also talked about this on the podcast before, and really I think a calling for entrepreneurs in the hospitality space today
Hmm.
to build these, for lack of a better word, right, like retreats, because I really do think society needs it. Society needs this escape. We don't get it, and we need
Hmm.
places that do force us to think. And actually that can be a really like scary thing, right? Like I always get scared. Like sometimes my wife and I don't get to get away very often anymore. But when we were before kids, we traveled a lot, and
Right.
anytime even though it was just the two of us all the time, anytime we were like in a new place and it was just a beautiful setting, all of a sudden like you're forced to grapple with thoughts and conversation that is
Yeah.
so easy to sort of just put off at home, right? And there's something about a space that has been well designed and that is very beautifully decorated that sort of evokes, right, the need for
Right.
some sort of response to these bigger picture questions. And it's really cool that you guys approach the design and development of the property to do just that.
Exactly. I mean, we want nature to be first and foremost because it is so core to human beings,
Mm,
and I say that human beings, like learn how to be a being again, learn how to be,
mm, mm.
and my mom used to always say like, she needed time away to learn how to be a human being and not a human doing, and so, uh, I'll give an example of kind of how that translates into like what the guest experience is like and
Please.
some decisions we've made because I think it's unique and it wasn't always like engineered and thought through. It's been trial and error that we've kind of come upon this. But for example, some of the rooms have a wood fired hot tub, and we wanted to provide like a cold plunge in the summer and a hot tub in the winter. And we could have bought commercial style tubs with pumps and filters and motors and all that kind of stuff. But one, it's noisy. We don't want any noise. We want utter complete silence,
Yeah.
except for anything that's going on outside with the birds and the animals and stuff. And two, um, we wanted people to participate in their experience and have to kind of earn it in a way and work for it. And a lot of what Thoreau talks about his experience was being self-sufficient and the
Mm,
process of doing something, whether it's cooking a meal or heating up your own hot tub. So we're going to design things and provide things that are really convenient, but they're not necessarily completely done for the guest. So these hot tubs, there's a heater, you got to build your own fire in them, and we provide the firewood and the kindling and the matches and make it like super easy. But like you still have to build the fire. You got to fill the tub up. You have to kind of stir it around and mix the hot water, and you have to
mm.
wait an hour to hour and a half. But like, what else do you have to do? Where else are you going? And
Yeah.
so that's an example of how we've made intentional decisions to keep that part of the experience and the art of doing things, cooking, building fires, going on hikes, can be really lost in kind of modern life these days. So that's just really really important to how we do things and what the guest experience ends up being like.
That's a fantastic example, and I love that you've built sort of this alternate take on an amenity that is so branded, right? To Walden. That's absolutely remarkable. You mentioned at the start of our conversation that you started with these 2 units and really sort of just to essentially run a beta test to see what do people
Right.
like, what works, what doesn't work, etc. You guys have 15 now. My understanding is, and I think you also said something along these lines a little bit earlier in our chat that eventually you want to grow, whether it's additional units on this particular site and or other sites. What have you learned at 15 units that you plan to take into kind of the next phase of this project, or that you might take into a future project? What learnings have maybe even surprised you, given where you're at with respect to growing from
Hmm.
2 units to now 15 units?
Obviously, scale matters, and that's no surprise. Just as far as your staffing levels and your efficiency that you can achieve across a certain number of units. So, 15 is obviously still micro in the hospitality world, and so we'd like to get the property closer to 40. We have 96 acres, so we have tons of space
Wow.
to do it on, and we're really designed for couples, adults. We're not a kid-friendly property. We allow kids 8 and older. That's been something we've had to kind of experiment with. First, we allowed kids, and then we're like, no, they're loud. They break stuff. The property is rocky, and there's cactuses everywhere. And it's just not a very family-friendly site either. But there is a demand for it. We get a lot of calls. We get a lot of people trying to negotiate their kids onto the property. So there is an opportunity for us to create something that is more family friendly, just a half a mile away, because we have such large expanse of land. So that's something that we'd like to do, to be able to provide an opportunity for a more kind of family like experience, especially since camping is kind of fundamental in a lot of ways to the American childhood.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so that's something we'd like to do. And then, obviously tons of stuff we've learned on just like the operations and the challenges that come with, soft-sided units that,
Mm.
don't wear or tear or break, but they do require some maintenance and care. Uh, for example, they have panels on the outside of these units that roll up and down.
Okay.
And we show people how to roll them up and down. But if it rains and they're open, the staff kind of need to hurry and close in the ones that are open. Otherwise, rain can get in. And
Mm.
so, things like that we just had to learn, the hard way. So we keep them shut all the time, and then we open them when guests arrive. So that's been kind of a unique kind of operational learning that we've had to go through.
I'm curious. You guys have like this store, which
Right.
is I believe like a self-service store.
Uh,
People can purchase things ahead of time through your guys' website, and then you also have a communal space that people can rent out for if they're having like a corporate offsite, or I think people might be able to even use the conference room if no one else is using it, just to catch up
mhm.
on some work or something like that. What Talk to us a little bit about the decision not to build overtly, I'll use the word overtly, communal amenities, and whether that was, whether that's something that you might do down the line, or whether you are very content with not pursuing that path. I feel like around 15 units, right, and then as you grow, you start to see people thinking through like communal fire pits, or like a communal
Hmm.
F&B spot or something like that. How have you thought about and then really weighed the pros and cons of communal amenities?
Yeah, that's something that we really didn't think through as well as we should have, because there is a demand for, let's say there's three parties with 2 people. So there's a group of 6, and they
Yeah.
all have a room and they want to get together and cook dinner. They can't really do it in one tent comfortably. They're more designed to fit 4 people than 6.
Yeah.
And so they were like, well, can we use the lodge? Or like, well, it's a 3,500 square foot event space. It's not really designed for 6 people.
Yeah.
But there is a main communal fire pit. So one way we've kind of gone around that programmatically is just having, Fridays are our busiest check-in day, and so we have like a cocktail hour by the fire,
Nice.
as a
Nice.
way for people to kind of meet each other, and meet someone else that they didn't come with, and people like that. They enjoy sunset, enjoy drinks, sit by the fire, have a good conversation. And yeah, the store is really just a function of providing convenience and amenity to people who they ran out of water. They don't have any beer. They need wine. They need snacks. So it's really
Yeah.
just a kind of an elevated, kind of like a royal blue grocery,
Yeah.
convenience store. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Do you, I'm curious if there are any other insights around guests that you've learned. Like, have you guys learned, oh, we're the perfect fit for this kind of traveler, or this kind of couple looking for this kind of experience? Or has it been pretty, pretty diverse with respect to the guests that have chosen to stay at Walden, or do you feel like there's like an archetype of like, oh, this is like a Walden guest?
Yeah, no, there's definitely an archetype because it is extremely dark at night.
Mm,
You'll hear coyotes, and we keep it intentionally dark. Like we turn all the lights off every night to avoid light pollution, so that you can like really enjoy the stars. There's a decent amount of walking from the rooms to the parking lot.
mm,
But that's all part of being there.
yeah.
That's not an accident. We're not for everybody for sure. But I will say we've really opened up the door to this type of outdoor experience to a lot of people who otherwise would never even try it. They're
Mm,
not going to go to REI and buy a bunch, spend $1,000 on camping gear. They're not going to go attempt to set it up and then sleep on the ground and get a terrible night's sleep and then call it camping and call it a fun experience. But everyone knows it was kind of less than. So um, there's a lot of people who, I'll just take couples for example, who one of them really wants to go camping, the other one like no way, and they're like, well, hey, look at this. This is a tent. It's got a bed. It's got a clawfoot bathtub, an outdoor shower, a little kitchenette, and a campfire. But we don't have any sort of like formal F&B restaurant or anything. So everything is going to be self-catered. So you still kind of get to have that element of the experience, build a fire, cook a meal, sit on the deck and enjoy sunset. So there's kind of something for everyone in that scenario.
yeah, yeah. I love it, and I think that's what's so exciting about this whole industry and what people are doing in this space is you're really making it possible. Not that it
Hmm.
wasn't possible before, but you're making it more desirable for people to actually enjoy and experience nature unlike they've ever experienced it before, right? Like I actually, my parents were big campers, and growing up, we would always camp in like, I grew up in Hawaii, so we would camp on the beach or we'd camp in, different state parks.
Yeah.
And to your point, right? Eventually, my parents got to an age where they were just like, "Ugh, like my my back hurts," and like we just like
Right.
stopped camping, right? Because and even for us kids, it was like it's not like we slept that well when we were on the road. And you kind of you wake up, you'd set everything up, and the next morning everyone was kind of like grumpy because like no one really slept, right? And like that's not
Hmm.
necessarily the way that you'd want to start. Like, and I come from a big family. It's not necessarily, you don't want a tired big family. It's just a recipe for disaster. And so it's
Right.
really cool to see folks like you innovating in this space and building stays that enable people to actually get maybe the best rest they've ever had. That's actually been some of my experiences when I've stayed at some of these glamping places. Is like I sleep better there than I do at home. Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
really it's amazing what you guys have done.
100% on the sleep thing. We've had people tell us that a lot, and I have no data points to like prove this. There's been no study around it, but I really believe that like having a more intimate exposure to like the outside world, whether it be
Mm,
the tent flaps are open and the breeze is blowing in. I mean, that's how human beings evolved to sleep in somewhat of an outdoor space,
yeah,
and that is kind of I think getting at a reconnection with nature that we've sealed off.
yeah,
And yeah, we get that feedback a lot. And people ask, like, think we spent like $10,000 on mattress on each mattress. And it's like, no, it's your basic Casper mattress, which is a
well,
great mattress,
yeah,
but it's not, you can spend 20 grand on a mattress these days.
yep, yep,
And
yep,
it's not that. It's really the environment and the place that's
yeah.
doing that.
So as you guys think about evolving and expanding the site, maybe getting to 40 units, as you've said, is there anything that you do differently with respect to either the unit types? You mentioned some of the challenges that some of the soft-sided structures that you guys have experienced with soft-sided structures. Would you change the potential structure that you'd use, or is there anything else that you would do to that you've learned that you do differently as you expand the site?
Um, I don't believe in regret. I just believe in like taking your life experience and using it to your advantage going forward. So I won't say that there's a lot that we would do differently, not because we did
Yeah,
everything right, but that's because, it's what it is and that's where we are. And that's what Walden, I think, has come to be appreciated for. So the tents do have their downsides for sure. They're not going to last 50 years. They,
yeah,
in the summer times can get quite warm and quite hot. But again, I'll go back to that. we're not trying to, design an experience different than that. That's kind of part of it.
Yeah.
Um, but but they're not family friendly. They're not super comfortable for a lot of people, and that becomes more and more of a challenge when we live our lives 100% in like a 72-degree environment. And we go from an air conditioned house to an air conditioned car to an air conditioned office and back, and maybe spend 10, 15 minutes just walking outside a little bit. So that it's a challenge to manage as far as
Yeah.
expectations from the guest level. Um, and, then as far as I think if when we expand, we would consider some more hard-sided units, mainly just around something that's a little bit more accommodating for families and
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's always interesting to me as people do phase twos and phase threes, how you see some things evolve and like I've seen folks that have been like, nope, hey, like we figured this out. It's literally just a clone. It's literally just like more units. And then there are other people, more of the same, I should say. And then there are other people that kind of totally pivot, and not that anything was bad or wrong with phase one, but they just want to go try a different unit for phase two and see how that performs. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I was just curious on your take on that.
And there's nuances, and I don't mean to say we haven't done anything wrong and I wouldn't change anything. There's nuances to like how we design something or our particular piece of furniture that we chose that won't hold up to kind of commercial use, or a particular paint that we, like little things like that like, yeah, that wasn't the best choice, but we'll learn from it and we'll correct it as we go.
Yeah, yeah. One of my final questions for you, Blake, is around just hot takes you have on the future of travel and hospitality, given your experiences living
Hmm.
abroad and traveling abroad to now owning and operating a hotel. What do you think about the future of travel and hospitality? Any bold predictions as we wrap 2024 and enter into 2025?
Yeah. A couple things. I think one, the type of properties, especially in this space, are going to continue to get more wild and crazy and unique, and I think that's awesome. And I think it's a testament to everyone's ingenuity and entrepreneurship and creativity to build these cool places where people get to spend a night in a tree or on a
Yeah,
cliff or on a boat or in the Arctic or something like that. Like I think that's amazing. It gets people out to see the world, to kind of go on, beyond their comfort zone. So I think that's going to continue to evolve. I can't remember the
yeah.
name of the property of who you did a podcast on, but it has a place. It's got kind of looks like a Star Wars set. Um,
Travis Chambers, Outpost
yeah,
X. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, that's crazy. That's so cool though. He's done
yeah,
such an amazing job, kind of envisioning and creating that. I think it's going to continue to evolve because there is going to be a decent amount of churn of people who, all right, we stayed here. Now let's go to a treehouse. Now they just kind of
yeah,
want to check all the boxes and experiment. And so I
yeah,
think the more that people can diversify and add different unit types, can create loyalty across brands who want to stay at. They know they're going to get the same experience, but it's going to be designed differently.
yeah,
And that's really what Walden's future looks like, is properties that are Walden properties that have the same elements of layout and design, but the units will be different because the geography, the climate, the local architecture is going to be different, and just uniqueness. And there's brand value in traveling to different properties to experience what each property has to offer. The other thing is, and I don't think this is not a hot take, but the kind of typical 2.5 staff per room, kind of metric, I think is the ratio is going to continue to fall and go away. I
mm,
mean, Airbnb has really proved that people don't really need all these things. They don't need turn down service. They don't want turn down service. I mean, okay, yeah, you get a chocolate, but like other than that, like, the baby boomer generation, I think, still expects that, but the younger Gen Z, Gen X, is like, I just need a room. I get it. My room's here. Give me the key. I can show myself in.
yeah,
But then be able to have resources available when they're needed. And technology is allowing so much more accurate and efficient guest communication, where it's kind of on demand guest service. It's just when you need it, but nothing more than you want or need. And I think that's going to continue to show itself in the industry. And
yeah,
I mean, it's going to have to, because we have a severe staffing and labor shortage in the industry. So it's both market driven from that, but it's also consumer driven from, I just don't think people really want all of those touch points. I was at a conference in Vegas last week, and I was lucky to get to the hotel at like 10 in the morning, but
Yeah.
the check-in line was like, looked like an airport security line.
Yeah.
At 3 o'clock, I was like, people were waiting there for at least 30, 45 minutes just to check,
Yeah.
just to get a key to go to a room that they've done. There's nothing like, especially a Vegas hotel. It's pretty
Yeah.
basic, pretty straightforward. um, so Walden operates a little bit of a hybrid model. We have staff that check people and most guests in. We have after hours check in and check out available as a process that people can do. But because it is a unique property, because people are sometimes out of their comfort zone, it's very assuring that they meet someone, can have their questions answered, and it helps them navigate the space in the room and make sure they
Yeah.
don't have any questions. Like, how does this work? How do we do this? We can address that real quick, when they check in, and then we back off and we don't bother them. We don't come in their room unless they ask. We just give
Yeah.
them space and time to enjoy the property.
Yeah. I was recently visiting a hotel in Toronto, and they sort of have a hybrid model as well. You get all your details for checking in to your room on your text, and you get the room code and all that fun stuff. But anyways, when you show up at the property, you walk in. They've got this like really cool like communal space that there's somebody sitting at a desk, but then there's like a coffee bar and there's like a wine bar, and it's a pretty relatively small space, but like very well designed, and it's like
Yeah.
their quote unquote lobby. But what I loved about it is I walk up and I see the concierge there and I say hi, hey, and they say hi, checking in, right? And they say you got all the
Yeah.
details, all good, right? And I'm just like, yes, thank you so much. And they're like, okay, well, hey, go upstairs, yeah, you relax a little bit, and then come down for a cocktail whenever you're ready. We'd love to
Right.
welcome you to the property or something like that, right? And what was so neat about that, I was like, cool, thanks. And then I just like took the elevator and went upstairs. And so there was something that I appreciated about having just that very, very little interaction with somebody, but they had to do no work, right? If there had been a line, I would have just like not said anything and just gone straight to my room. And that
Hmm.
sort of hybrid model, I'm pretty bullish on, because I do think, especially at a certain price point, the app, the automated messaging features are great, but at a certain price point, you do want to know that there's
Yeah.
somebody that you can
Yeah.
talk to if that's on site if you need to.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. There are limitations to the kind of self-directed model where, you're like, is anyone even here? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
um, yeah, there's a hotel that I heard about it, and I think it's in Savannah, where same kind of setup. It is new or newly redeveloped. Uh, the check-in desk is like at the back. When you walk in, it's like in the back of the room, but there's a coffee shop, and like the communal area is first and foremost. And so you're
yeah,
greeted in kind of more of like a bed and breakfast type of setting, you know?
yeah,
And so it's engaging you on a much different level of being hosted in a space that's warm and opening and communal than a traditional transaction of like, just give me the key, show me the number. Technology can kind of do all that for us. Let's let that be easy and efficient, but let's still provide some level of human connection.
yeah.
Should anyone need something or have a question, they know a person. But one thing I can't stand in hotels that don't have name tags on the staff. We've always been
Yeah,
so big, like I want people to know who's helping them, and
yeah,
have a
yeah,
connection that's just like I can remember this person's name and establish, even if it's for 2 days, some sort of a relationship. So I don't think we can totally go the route of being completely self-directed and completely self-check-in without it really, I think, having its costs in the long term.
yeah. And these sort of like communal lobby experiences too. What's really neat about that is, and I watched this happen at this hotel, is later on in the evening when I was downstairs, there was like, 3 people in line or whatever. But then the barista was asking if anyone wanted a coffee. The bartender was like, hey guys, if you would want to start here, and the line's like, there's a couple people in front of you. If you want to grab a cocktail first, like, feel free to come on over. And so all of a sudden that like waiting in line experience that you were describing in your Vegas hotel
Yeah.
just disappears, because it's like, oh yeah, I will get a coffee, or I will get a drink. And then it just your experience, the whole check-in experience is wildly different, even though it's like exactly the same. You just have a couple of additional opportunities to spend more money with the hotel. And it
Hmm.
was just, it's such a funny observation that it was like these little things dramatically change your first impressions of a space.
Right, right. And in a way, in some settings, the general manager could be the barista. So, or the front desk
Exactly.
agent could be the barista. So you're generating revenue, not with just idle kind of front desk time, but by serving people. Let's let the check-in process be a tech-centric, way of doing things. But then we can actually interact on a personal level and sell them something and give them the key, in the same process. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh gosh. Well, we could go on and on, Blake, but
Yeah, we could.
So thankful for you and your time and all that you've done at Walden. For listeners tuning in, I'm going to have links to Walden Retreats in the show notes below. And then Blake, if it's cool, I'll link your LinkedIn, unless there's a better way you prefer to people to connect with you if they're interested in just learning more about the business or staying at Walden. Is there a better place for folks to go other than your website and or your LinkedIn?
No, that's perfect. Obviously check out our Instagram. It's going to have the most up-to-date kind of scenes, what's happening on the property, what the property looks like. It's obviously a 4 seasons kind of place, so it changes from month to month. So be sure to check that out.
Amazing. Yes. And we'll have links to the Instagram in the show notes as well. Blake, thank you so much for your time, sir. It's been a pleasure.
All right, Zach. Thank you.
Hey friends, thanks for joining us for this episode of Behind the Stays. I'd love to know what you thought of the episode. Feel free to shoot me a DM on Instagram at Behind the Stays or send me an email at zach@joinjourney.com. If this is your first time tuning in, it's a pleasure to have you and we hope to have you back again soon. But if you've been a listener for a while, I'd greatly appreciate if you'd subscribe to the show if you aren't already, and then leave us a rating and review of the show wherever you're streaming this podcast. Oh, and if you know a hotelier or a hospitality entrepreneur that's building something new and novel, I invite you to introduce them to me so that my team and I can discuss bringing them on the show. Again, you can just shoot me an email at zach@joinjourney.com or a DM on Instagram. Behind the Scenes is brought to you by Journey, a next-generation loyalty program built for the modern traveler. We're looking to onboard new boutique hotels, unique stays, and the top vacation rental management companies onto our platform every day. If you're a hospitality entrepreneur who has a stay or a collection of stays with soul, we'd love for you to apply to join our alliance at joinjourney.com/alliance. Again, that's joinjourney.com/alliance. Thanks for being here, y'all. We will see you next time.